Listener discretion is advised. This episode of Roundtable Mindset tackles mature themes and may contain content that is not suitable for all audiences. We recommend listener discretion and parental guidance for listeners under the age of 16.
Welcome to Roundtable Mindset, the podcast where we seek to understand and share different perspectives in order to grow and challenge our own. And we encourage you, our guest, to do the same.
Each week we will pick a topic to discuss, sharing our own unique thoughts and insights. There will be times when we won't agree, and let's be real, that's probably going to be most of the time, and that's okay. We feel it's important to understand that we can live in this polarized world and still respect one another and even be friends.
Well, hello and welcome back to Roundtable Mindset. This is Jamie.
And I'm Malin.
And we're back with a special edition of Roundtable Mindset and a new adjective.
A law-inspired edition.
I was thinking, and this probably isn't even appropriate for on our podcast, but I was thinking we should call this one like Law and Order or something like that. That would be fun. Anyway.
Oh, you like the cliches. Okay, I get it. I see it.
I do.
I know what you're trying to do. No, this episode is, I'm not going to lie. I've been waiting to have this type of conversation. Our food for thought is geared towards, laws and police officers and the way we think about laws, from our food for thought, even to our special guest that's coming on. So the questions and the conversations that we're about to have, I've been stewing over for months and really been excited to find someone that will come and actually have an honest conversation with us. So looking forward to this one, probably one of my most anticipated episodes we've done so far. I'm going to say, for me at least.
Yes. So, speaking of food for thought, my friend, what do you got for us today?
Okay, so this is, again, part of our theme for today. I was thinking about what could we talk about, or what could spark some conversation, thought-provoking responses with regards to laws, police officers, all of those different things. And so one of the things that I came up with, which I kind of contemplated a little bit myself, is there such a thing as a victimless crime? Can you think of any kind of crime, Jamie, something that's against the law that is 100% victimless? You sent this to me in the text message the other day, and I was like, I really wanted to rack my brain hard and say, yes, there's got to be victimless crimes out there. But I don't, every example I thought of, it may not have been like a direct result of a crime, but it feels like it was down the road. You know what I mean? So like, I don't know. I'm a big Breaking Bad fan. Like I watched the show religiously, and thank goodness it's not Grey's Anatomy this time. At least it's a different show.
I'm a fan of that too, but
yes, we religiously watched and binged and watched again Breaking Bad. It was so good.
Oh, you did? Okay, so it was that one time when Jesse showed up and the addicts had like jacked an ATM, and he was like, victimless crime, yo. I was like, well, wait a minute. No, not a victimless crime. I mean, every example I thought of, I couldn't think of one that there really wasn't a victim, I guess.
Well, and again, that I think how we define victim is going to be really how you answer this, because here's what I was thinking, just so you have a little peek into my mind. And before I have, we have an array. Yeah, we have an array of listeners, and I want to keep all of you coming back week after week. I am not saying that I'm promoting these. I'm just saying, if I had to think in terms of, are there crimes that I would consider victimless? I have a small handful. They're horrible. I would never do them. I am not a proponent of them because of my ethics and morals. But in the context of this question, here we go. What do you say about prostitution? If
Oh,
two,
no.
now listen, if two consenting adults enter into, I'll say, a contractual agreement, trying to keep it above water as much as I can, and who's being victimized at that point? I understand there's a whole array that feeds into that industry, and I am not saying it's a healthy industry or one that we should promote. I'm just saying in the context of two adults coming together consensually, one paying the other one for services, wouldn't that be considered a victimless crime?
I don't agree. No, I don't think that's a victimless crime.
Okay. Could you want to expand on that for a second?
Not really. No, I'm just kidding.
Just taking at face value. Okay.
Nope, that's right. No, no, I think that the person that is being, that is providing the services for purchase, that person is a victim. And that's the reason that it's considered a crime. So no, I don't think that that's a victimless crime.
Okay. Recreational drug use.
Recreational drug use.
Yeah. It's against the law, but let's just pick a state. If it's not legal for you to smoke marijuana, and we don't have to do the hard stuff. Let's just keep it. You smoke marijuana for recreational purpose. Victimless crime.
No, I don't think that's a victimless crime either. I mean,
who's being victimized?
I don't know. It's illegal, first of all.
Well, that's why it's a crime.
Right,
Sorry,
right.
Go ahead. Sorry.
You really want to argue this one, huh?
I do want to hear what you have to say, but in my mind, I'm like, who is really the one being victimized if it's recreational drug? Because it's you. So anyways, go ahead. Well,
right. But, depending upon who I'm attached to, if I'm a parent of small children and I'm, hitting the pipe with my babies in the house and I fall asleep and they're not taken care of. You know what I mean? I don't know that there is a standard victim in that crime, but I think there's lots of potential victims in that crime, which is what makes it illegal. Like drinking and driving, there's not always going to be a victim in that crime, right? But there's potential victims in that crime. That's why it's a crime, because you can't guarantee safety of all of the people around when there's drinking and driving taking place.
Right. And again, I completely understand in all of these situations, right? Even the first one we mentioned, there's different scenarios you can apply that would make it not a victimless crime. So maybe a better question is, could this crime ever be a victimless crime? Is there ever an opportunity where somebody's doing recreational drugs, they don't have kids, they live alone, they don't have a car? You know what I'm saying? Like, to me, then maybe it's the opportunity that you can do, or the opportunity that you have to inflict pain or even death onto other people by this crime is what makes it doesn't make it a victimless crime. Because I think any scenario we can come up with, we can make any crime have a victim.
Ooh, I feel like there was one time, and this might, I don't know if this will bleed over into our conversation or not, but I feel like there was one time I was reading something like a police report, and it was like society. They listed the society as victim number one or something like that. Like, so, I mean, that I do think that that's a thing too, that, it is a crime against society. If your state has deemed that, that marijuana is illegal, then by breaking that law, it's a crime against the community that you're in and things like that. So no victimless crime.
Okay. I have one more scenario and then I have a comment that I want you to respond to.
Love it. Okay.
The other situation and assisted suicide. So some states don't allow you to help another person commit suicide. We've talked about this in previous episodes. So where it's not legal, if somebody helps assist somebody with assisted suicide, who's the victim in that situation?
I prefer the term medically assisted death, just so that
put whatever kind of perfume cologne you want on it, but assisted suicide,
it's not
or
perfume
medically
cologne for people that struggle with that. It might be triggering to be talking about medically assisted suicide as opposed to medical assistance in death or something like that. But and again, I mean, I think that's situational. There could be victims in that, I suppose. But I think I don't know that every single law is there to prevent victimization. I think, some of that is to uphold community values and to, ensure health and safety for all citizens, not just, you know what I mean?
I do. And I think the word, what makes me gravitate towards this question really makes me ponder, are there crimes out there that really the only person who would be, and I'm using air quotes, a victim is the person who's committing the crime? And again, we've touched on it. I think any crime, you can put together a scenario where that's just not true. I can also think in terms of there's some crimes that I know that no matter how you execute them, there's always a victim. And so I think this idea of, are there victimless crimes? I'm going to give my opinion now, which is I'm in the camp of, I think there might be a small couple, but again, it's always going to be based on situational. But I know there are definitely some crimes that no matter how they're committed, they will always have a victim. And that's the nature of the crime. So, that's kind of where I land in all of this. But here's my comment that I wanted. Oh, go ahead. You look like you have something.
I just thought of something. In Podunk town, I don't know, tiny little towns, sometimes they bring up like old laws that have never been stricken from the books. Like it's illegal to spit on the street in front of a woman or something like that. Those, I think, are victimless crimes.
Well, not necessarily, because some of those crimes back in the old times, women were considered property. So just because they're not enforced doesn't mean that I think they're victimless. But
well,
I see your point.
From my perspective today, if someone spits in the street in front of me, it's not going to hurt my feelings. It's fine. Like, spit away, sir. I won't even call it in. Like, it'll be fine.
But you've still been victimized. Anyways, here's my last comment, and I really want to get your opinion on this. And I'm sure this is probably going to be triggering to you all over the place, and I'm not meaning to, but I don't know how else to ask this. So, do you think that the way society is going, it would become less and less to find a victimless crime because there is a victim mentality that seems to be kind of going through our society? I'll just leave it there. Like, do you have a comment or an opinion on that?
Not overly triggering. Thanks for warning me though. But no, that's an interesting thought. And it's something, I've had conversations with even my kids about this. Because I think that victim mentality, I think that alone is based on perspective. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know that I can sit here and decide whether or not you feel or have been victimized and scrutinize the difference in that unless it was happening to me. And so I don't, and I guess I don't see this overwhelming shift in victim mentality like some others do. I think that there are more platforms for people to talk about the things that have happened to them. I think that there are, I think there's more availability to people who empathize with that because they've also experienced that. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think that I can also look back at my own growth patterns and things like that and see that at the times where I was like, painting myself in my own mind as the victim were times that I was not able to grow very well. And it wasn't until I took ownership and responsibility for my actions to say, okay, this is how I contributed to that. But that was part of a growth process for me. And so I don't know, I guess I have a problem with the premise of your question more than the idea, I guess.
Okay. Well, I think that's another opportunity for us to kind of maybe circle back around this on a bigger conversation, because I think having what I'm perceiving as a victim mentality and what you perceive as a victim mentality, I think we might not be seeing eye to eye on, which would be great to kind of dig into that a little bit more. So I think we should probably move on to our guest that we have with us today, which I am extremely excited to have come on. And you look like you have something you want to say, Jamie.
No, I was just waiting for some some feedback from my comments rather than we're going to talk about this another time. Bye-bye.
Because okay, so if you want feedback on it, then I think that's going to start a whole nother conversation. So I was trying to save us a little bit to say,
understand.
Okay, we could probably put that into the books for now, because the next statements that would come out of my mouth, we would take up the next half hour easily. So no disrespect and no dismissal. I'm just trying to say, okay, we could probably package that for a later time, which we both would enjoy a lot more than just trying to squeeze into a 2-minute response, because
Gotcha.
I think what you said was will take a lot more time for me to respond to than what I think we have left. So
safe to say you disagree, and we'll have to hash it out on another episode of Roundtable Mindset. Stay tuned, folks.
Stay tuned, everyone. Yeah, that was a very nice way of putting what I was trying to kind of skirt around. So thank you for that, Jamie. Okay,
you bet.
So our guest today, very excited. We have a deputy. His name is Deputy Jay. He comes from a sheriff's office in a Midwest area. Where he is a deputy is in a metropolitan area. So he comes from a place where the population is, a considerable amount. We're not talking a small country city here, and we're not talking probably, hundreds of millions of people, but somewhere in between. And so we have the opportunity to bring him on and ask him a variety of questions on different topics. And this is where my excitement is coming in, because I have so many questions that I would love to ask and kind of get a peek behind the curtain on an everyday police officer's life and some of the things they have to do on the job and how they interact with people. So without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and welcome Deputy Jay to the roundtable. How you doing today, Deputy Jay?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
Welcome. We're excited to have you here.
So
thank you. Actually, I would like to comment on your opening, just if I could real quick. I don't want to stay away from, I'm sitting here muted listening, and I'm just kind of chuckling. And the prostitution thing, just real quick. I mean, the prostitution kind of actually is hand in hand with my feelings as, the marijuana, legalizing marijuana. It's kind of, you say it's a victimless crime. The problem is, yes, you could have the transaction between two people. However, with prostitution, it's such a fine line between that and trafficking, right? A lot of the victims of prostitution don't realize, or trafficking don't realize, that they're being trafficked. They just view it as, their prostitution, what they're doing is okay. They're making money, and the person above them is making money, and it's all legit. And then marijuana, I kind of feared what happened with that. What I feared when it happened is that marijuana is a gateway drug. So when it got legalized in so many states, it's almost become, what I've seen is like a cigarette to people. I mean, you're starting to see a very huge uptick in heroin, methamphetamine, fentanyl type overdoses. So.
Well, and actually, the language around that has even changed. I was talking with a friend of mine about how, like in high school, if someone asked you if you smoked, it was a cigarette. And now when they ask you if you smoke and you say yes, the assumption is that it's pot. And I had no idea that had shifted that way since in the very few years since I've been in high school.
Well, and it's not any surprise, probably from the people listening and from you, Jamie. I'm a pretty straight-laced person. Up until I was in college, I didn't even see what marijuana even looked like. And so, but the one thing I did know, even way back before then, is the smell of it. So it's kind of funny that it's like the perception is, oh, you're smoking marijuana. When, in my opinion, you could smell that thing coming a mile away. So it's like one is not the equal as the other. But no, I was wondering, Jay, if you were going to have any kind of comments or commentary on our food for thought, just because of your line of work. Is there anything else that you would like to kind of do an introduction on yourself that I might have missed, or maybe I fumbled through, or are you good to go?
Nope, we're good.
All right. Well, Jamie, do you want to jump in with some of our questions to kind of kick us off?
Well, I guess my first question would be, just in getting to know you a tiny bit, what brought you to law enforcement? Why was this an attractive career path for you?
I mean, as a kid, obviously, you always looked up to law enforcement like they were heroes, right? They were running into buildings when others are running out. To go fast, chasing bad guys. The stuff you see in the movies, which is nothing what we actually do for a living. But That's kind of what drove me towards it. As I got older, I didn't view myself in law enforcement. I didn't see, I'm heavily tattooed. You know, I didn't fit in my mind the image of a police officer. Mm-hmm. So as I got older, it was something that I wanted to try. They were obviously, it's changed. The demographic has changed. The profession has changed. There's not a lot of people wanting to get into this profession. So I took the opportunity, took that and ran with it, and was fortunate enough to get on. And in all honesty, I mean, it's everything and more of what I hoped it would be. So, and then getting to help people, I can get more into that, obviously, as we go through this, but those are the kind of the reasons for me to get into it.
So I do have a question that's kind of piggybacks off of that. And I think you started talking about it. But I just want to ask the direct question, which is, from your perspective, how has maybe the, society's opinion of law enforcement change, or have you seen it change? I know when I was a kid, a police officer, utmost respect for them, and they kind of commanded and they received respect from the community, even from people that were committing crimes, still showed them a level of respect. As I'm aging, and again, I'm an outsider looking in, it feels like to me that respect is shifting or changing or maybe even going away. Would love to get your perspective on that, to say from where you sit, how are you seeing society's, opinion of police officers?
I mean, what I try to tell people is don't let social media fool you. It's still there. It's very much there. I've had more people come up to me and thank me for what I do, and people from all different walks of life, all different colors, all different backgrounds. They've came up and thanked me for what I do. There's been a very few that have actually, flipped me off when I'm driving or cussed at me. And what's funny is the ones that are doing that are your younger generation that aren't in any trouble. They've not really been in any trouble. It's just they're allowing social media to drive their hate.
I feel like there's like a whole segment right there that we could probably pop the top on. And so, again, I'm not dialed into the youth. I know, Jamie, you work with, kind of what you do on a day in, day out. You interact with youth, today's youth, more than I ever will. I interact with my kids and my kids' friends. So do you have, do you kind of see anything in your line of work, Jamie, that kind of mirrors that, or you can relate to? I'm trying. And again, I just have a very small window into that kind of community.
I can't think of anything specifically, but I mean, if you think about even, how we were raised and those things that happened in formative years for us, that kind of shifts and changes our perspective. And so I suppose, just given the events that have been in the media and things like that over the last few years, I could see how that might shift perspectives or perceptions of law enforcement. And I think I don't have any, I guess I can't think of anything specific without going into a whole generational bashing session to say that, that might be part of it. But go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it's so you say like it's, hate is taught.
Yeah.
When I first started in this profession, I was down at our courthouse because that's where we start. And there was a younger male that came in. He's a person of color. He came in with his son. He's probably 2 years old. He was barely walking. And I come from a background of, the school that I went to was a metro school, which was made up of, white was a minority. So I had a lot of friends from all different backgrounds. So I have no problem talking to people of any race. And when he walked by me, I said, "Hey, how are you?" And I looked down at his son and I said, "Hey, little buddy." And he grabbed his son, looked at me and goes, "We don't talk to them." And so it's like that right there. It's like you're teaching the hate at such a young age to hate law enforcement for reasons that he may have. I mean, he may have had a bad interaction with law enforcement. I can't say. I don't know. I've had bad interactions with law enforcement, but I didn't take it out on that profession. That person may have just been having a bad day or a bad week.
Well, and I do see that. I do see that specific issue as something that's pretty prevalent across the board anymore, actually, is, it's like, you have a bad interaction with a retail worker, and then all retail workers are, miserable and mean or something like that. And I don't believe that. I want to put that out there now. But, when you let something like that color your interactions in the future, I do see that as a pretty common thing that is happening, that I see happening right now too. So.
Okay, so here's my next question. Since we're talking about this, and I'm trying to relate, one of the things that I'm trying to get to is, there was a movement not too long ago about defund the police. And so from my, upbringing, that concept would never even have gotten legs or movement on it. But in today's society, I mean, there's a whole platform, there's a whole movement. Everything's like, you hear defund the police almost, on a weekly basis at this point. So I'm curious, when we have, social media maybe feeding the younger generation, we also have, I would say, multi-generations calling for defund the police in certain areas of the country. As a police officer, what does that mean or look like to you? Like, when you hear defund the police, what does that mean to you, or how has that impacted your work?
Yeah, and honestly, I'd never even heard of that before until the protest happened. When 2019, 2020, whenever the protest kind of kicked off, I'd never even heard that before. And then it took me a minute when they were saying it and chanting it to really kind of sit back and go, okay, what do they actually mean by this? Like, do they truly mean that they want to abolish law enforcement? Like, no one could really want that, right? I mean, a lawless country is chaos. I think we all know that. So when I sat back and truly kind of like thought about and had conversations, and I would be on the front lines with these people as they're protesting. And when this is kind of like there's a lot to that a lot of people didn't see. When the cameras are rolling, it was a completely different conversation. And when the cameras shut off, it was a normal conversation like we're having right now. And I would say, what do you mean by defund the police? Like, what are you asking for? And really what it was is they wanted to get rid of like some of the funding that is sent to us. They would like to see those funds sent to other areas, like help out in communities like poverty, things like that. That's really what they're meaning by defund the police, which that's fine. I mean, if that's truly what you want, then show me where you want that money to go. And then let's see how that could actually better be used, not just we're going to take the money from a profession that you're claiming is so uneducated and undertrained and put this money elsewhere into like our community projects and things like that. So when they say that, it's with good, I guess, heart, but it's, where's that money truly going to go? Where's that really going to be driven to?
So, well, and what I'm hearing you say maybe is that conversation looks different. Do you think that conversation looks different too, like based on who you're talking to? And because, when I look at that whole thing, sometimes I really think it was like terrible marketing at a terrible time. Like somebody said this phrase and it caught fire, because that's the same, that's kind of the same perception I have had of the whole, quote unquote, defund the police idea. Was like, hey, let's in the area that I live and work in, we our local behavioral health agency poured funding into like a co-responder program, so that if there's a call that has a mental health component, they've got someone who's trained to deal with that with them. And that was, I don't know that they defunded something in the police department to add that. They added funding for that. But that's kind of the idea that I had heard. But do you think that I wonder if that sentiment is different in different areas too, because that's something I do think that there are some folks out there that think that defunding the police completely is what needs to happen, based on maybe events or actions that are happening in their area. So, in your department, what is the overall perception of that?
I would say the overall perception is they're wanting to cut funds from us. Mental health is probably one of the biggest issues. I mean, you kind of hit on it, but they are like where we're at. There is no mental health really facilities. I mean, the facilities that we have as a hospital, they're taken there and they're released within 24 to 48 hours if they're not a serious risk to themselves. And then they're right back on the street. And within a couple of days, they're right back in there again, because most of them are homeless. They've either been kicked out of the shelters because of getting into fights or whatever. So they have nowhere really to go but the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And the hospital is so overrun, they have nowhere to keep them. And so they just, you know, even the ones that are high risk to themselves, they're not in there for long and they're back out. I mean, unfortunately, they get out and sometimes they end up hurting themselves or they end up taking their own lives. And it's just, mental health is probably one of the biggest issues that we probably have right now. And they're not combating it. So when they say defund the police, I think, like you said, there are two different sides to that. And it comes from that movement of the protest, right? Like, it was driven at a time that probably wasn't the best to bring it up, but I understand what they're meaning by it and what they want to do. There's a younger generation who are on the side of get rid of cops altogether. And then there's the other side that are older that are like, no, we need law enforcement. However, we could use some of the money, could be somehow, can we get funds from somewhere to help these other areas? Right.
Have you seen any defunding happening in your department?
No, not, I don't know directly. No, I haven't really seen it directly, I guess.
Okay. I was just curious if that was something locally that had been kind of brought up and acted on. So thanks for that.
Well, and again, I'm going to keep referring to myself as an outsider because I'm not in law enforcement and I'm not in some of these conversations. But what I'm seeing through the media or conversations with other people, it seems like there's, to me, that movement that you both are touching on where, yes, you know, mental illness is a really difficult thing, not being treated. I think even the state that I'm in, was legislation not too long ago that was really kind of almost working against the mentally ill, which was unfortunate. But when you put those pieces together, I don't know. I think a blend of that conversation needs to happen. So I don't think we can take money away from the police officers or eliminate the police officers, but we also can't forget the mentally ill. So, you know, Jamie, I hope you don't mind me sharing, but there was conversations that we had where we were talking about this a couple months back, if you remember. And some of the ideas was, you know, have somebody who's trained in mental illness to go along with the police officer when they go and answer these types of calls. And at first I was very hesitant because I'm like, well, I wouldn't want to have, if there is an individual who's suffering from a mental illness condition and they are committing a crime, at that point, I don't want somebody who's trained to maybe talk them, not literally, off the ledge and kind of calm situations down. I want trained police officers to come and get everything situated and then maybe deal with that mental issue after everything has been kind of resolved and the situation's been removed. And so when we were first talking about that, I was really hesitant. I kind of dug in my heels, if you can remember. And I think really now, after kind of thinking about it for a few months and having this conversation, and Jay, this question's coming to you, are police being trained more in how to handle mental illness? And are some of those components that we were talking about being introduced as part of the training for, and I know you can't speak for police nationwide, but in your area, are those elements being taught or trained for police officers?
We get training. They get training. We have mental health deputies. And then as far as us, just a regular street deputy, we do in-services 4 times a year. And it's just different topics that are brought up. Mental health is one that's brought up, and it's more of how to recognize when somebody is, have, a mental health issue and how to talk to them and how to try to de-escalate the situation and just be understanding. And then we have deputies that if we recognize that, we call them to our where we're at and have them help as well. So having somebody ride along, I don't know how that'd work. I mean, I can't say no and I can't say yes to that. I mean, it would be interesting to see. However, I mean, we do call different mobile crisis type situation. They come out, but here's the deal. And I've watched them come to calls of mine where a lady was clearly there were some issues and she never made the statements of I'm going to hurt myself, but she was borderline. They would come out, get to the call, be there 5 minutes, and then they just walked away. They're like, okay, you're good. See you later. Mm-hmm. So, and these are trained health professionals, right? This is their job. This is what they do. So I don't know. I just don't know how that would look. I'm not opposed to it.
Yeah, I've always wondered how many, like what the percentage of calls are. And I'm positive this varies area to area, but you know, what percentage of calls are directly because of mental health? And, because I think, you know, what's sad is to keep you find folks busy with those kind of calls that are or could be largely prevented with good access to services, and that's how I do kind of see, and I think that's been that way for a long time, you know. And I work in the child serving system, and really just kind of thinking like, when there's no one else to call, you know, how much of this kiddo who is now involved with probation and the juvenile justice system, but it's really mental health, you know what I mean? So
right,
getting them
it goes, there's like the mental health thing is kind of like you said, like what part of it is truly mental, and then there's the part of it is a substance abuse, and those kind of go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's the substance abuse. That's a whole other problem in itself too. So it's the same thing. They get into hospital, they're checked out within 12 hours.
Okay, so this is very interesting. I do have another question that's related to more, I shouldn't say more of a sensitive nature, but it's a sensitive conversation. So I also want to make sure that I do a good job teeing this up as respectfully as I can, because again, this question comes from a place of respect. It's not trying to be overly debating, although we probably will debate a little bit, which has to do with the whole Black Lives Matter movement. And I think police brutality kind of go hand in hand here. So we all are aware of the incident that took place up in Minneapolis with George Floyd. So I think, to me, if I go back in my memory banks, that's kind of where Black Lives Matter either was kind of really hit the mainstream, or for me at least, that's where I kind of link the two events together. What I'm interested in is kind of understanding the whole Black Lives Matter movement from a police perspective. Again, I'm removed from that. I wasn't in the area where that even took place. I've never experienced police brutality for myself. So I understand that I'm not an expert and I have no real life experience when it comes to this, but I do have some questions on some of the things that I'm observing. And some of those questions stem from, how the police responded to, that incident, as well as if you hear stories all the time about police brutality and you see, body cam footage of, people being mistreated. And I'm sure there's a whole story there's a whole other side of the story on a variety of these situations. So I'm just curious, would you mind, Deputy J, if you can kind of go through a little bit of, from your perspective, Black Lives Matter, police brutality, kind of some of the things that you're seeing from your perspective?
Yeah. So when that all kicked off, obviously, when you look at the footage that they shared, it looked bad. I mean, all of us, a bunch of my coworkers, we sat there and we're like, it angered you. You looked at it, it angered me. I was upset. But then I had to step back and remove myself from it and go, okay, I understand. There's always two sides to every story, right? We can't sit there and just take right now what I'm seeing for face value, and then that's my only opinion that I'm going to formulate on it. Unfortunately, that's what happened. A lot of people took that, politicians. There's obviously a great special out there that is on YouTube. It's called The Fall of Minneapolis. I highly recommend watching it because it's eye-opening. It was eye-opening for me of how corrupt that whole thing was. And in the end, the fear was that if they released the true footage and what truly happened, there was going to be even worse chaos done to the city, and they were trying to mitigate what was already happening. Unfortunately, it backfired on their face. And in my opinion, and what that episode shows, or this YouTube documentary shows, is 4 officers are in prison right now for a crime they didn't commit. As far as police brutality, I don't see it. I've never seen it. I guess, obviously there's bad people in what I said, there's bad people in every profession. Unfortunately, racism is never going to go away. You can't change everyone's opinion. It's disgusting. I have my sister has always dated black men. I have nieces and nephews that are mixed. I have my brother has a mixed wife. Their baby is mixed. I mean, I'm around it, and I tell people this all the time, and they still don't believe it. They look at me, they look at my uniform, they're like, "Nope, you're racist," because of the uniform that I wear, and I'm white. I'm automatically racist. So it's okay to profile me and my profession, but then they're trying to get rid of racism, but they're essentially doing the same thing.
I'm curious, I guess, did you see a shift or have you seen a shift since, since 2020? That's when all those riots happened. And, I guess for me, it's important to note that there were lots of things happening at that time as far as, this topic and this subject goes. There were several people who had been killed in a pretty short amount of time, that I think that was just like a flashpoint, right? That was like a lightning rod for what had been happening around that space. But have you noticed a difference for the policies of your department or the way that you approach interactions? And do you think that's because of the events that happened in 2020 and the protests that came after that?
Do you mean, I guess, what do you mean as far as like policies or approach? You mean like how we deal with like persons of color? I guess I don't know what you're referring to in that.
Yeah. Like, have you had extra training in that area? Has there been any shifting in your work since that time because of the things and the events that have happened around police brutality and the Black Lives Matter movement?
Yes. I mean, there was, it's always brought up in our trainings. I wouldn't say so much as far as police brutality. If you truly go back and watch these, you'll see that, yes, around that time, there was a huge spark, right? Because there was a lot of, I guess, black men, women being shot by law enforcement. But if you truly go back and watch, they were justified. Like, these were not just cops going into situations and just yanking people out of their cars and then just beating the crap out of them, right? This was not the Rodney King situation, which that was disgusting in itself. These are crimes that there's cameras everywhere now. Everyone has a camera. Everyone has a camera on their phone. Every single American walking around has a camera, and everything that we do is being filmed. These situations were not unjustified. I was raised in the sense of, a cop stops me, you stop. You don't sit there and argue on the side of the road. You show your hands when they ask you to show your hands, right? You don't sit there and go and try to plead your case that you had no right to pull me over. That's not the time nor the place. As a law enforcement official in that situation, when you're doing those things, it's scary for me because I have no idea what you have going on. I have no idea. Did you just leave a house and you just murdered someone? Did you just leave? Or do you have a bunch of drugs in the car? Are you wanted? I have no idea who you are. All I know is that you're resisting my simple commands of, hey, this is why I stopped you. I need your license. Those are pretty simple commands. And when somebody's resisting those, it kind of starts triggering things. Okay, something's not lining up here. And then we want to remove that person from the car. We want them to get away from the car because we don't know what's in that car. So then when you try to remove someone from the car and now they're being even more resistive, it heightens everything. So some of these, obviously, I don't know the exact, besides the George Floyd incident, there was another one that happened. I think it was up in Minnesota. I'm not exactly sure. I believe the guy had a warrant. He beat his girlfriend. He got stopped on the side of the road. He was being resistive, didn't show his hands, was reaching around in the car, and he was shot and killed. But it was all justified. I mean, what the guy was doing was 100% against, what any person shouldn't do in that situation. The BLM thing, the Black Lives Matter, I mean, yeah, absolutely. All lives matter. I mean, I don't like the fact that we're just going to say this, right? I think that all lives matter. Again, I come from a different walk of life. Like I wasn't from money. I was dirt floor poor type of situation. So, and then I went to school with different ethnicities and I was friends with all of them. So I treat you the same way that you're going to treat me. If you're going to cuss and scream at me, I'm just going to smile at you and walk away. Like, it's not worth my time.
Well, and, I will, I'll be honest and respectfully, disagree a little bit, just because there's pieces of this conversation I think that are additional to and outside of the scope of what we're talking about here. And I hear that, you're doing your job and carrying it out in a just and professional way. I guess, for me, one of the things that I have to look at and the lens that I have to look at some of these things through is, systematic racism, and not necessarily singular departments or singular areas, but there's a lens there that I think does play into that. And so, I guess to follow up on that, thinking about these experiences for Americans of color, and going into a traffic stop and something like that, having all of these other events that have happened, and the things that they have seen and the things that they've heard and been taught. How do you approach that? Do you approach that differently? Do you think about that when you approach like, for instance, a traffic stop? Does that play into how you interact and how you approach those?
You mean as far as like if I stop them and they're kind of they're being, I guess, somewhat resistive? Is that what you're referring to? Like if I walk up and they're kind of like not wanting to show me their hands or being argumentative?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I've had ones where, I've had stops where I stop a black person and they say, you stopped me because I'm black. Okay, well, no, I stopped you because of the traffic violation. Why would I stop you because you're black? I'm sorry, but to me, that's an ignorant statement. I stopped you because I have a lawful reason to stop you. And anyone can go into my agency or any agency and request a FOIA of this certain deputy or this certain officer's traffic stops and who they've stopped based off of color, gender, and then look at the statistics. I highly recommend people do that. I mean, statistics will probably show that I stop 90% white. And the citations that I write, okay, do I write a certain gender, a certain color, a citation over a warning? Am I favoring one side or the other? So no, I don't treat any different. I just pay attention. If I go up to your car and I ask you for those simple instructions and then you're kind of starting to be argumentative, I just sit there and I still speak calmly because that's what we're trained. We need to stay at our level, even though they're at a higher level. Like we can't come up to their level. Mm-hmm. We have to try to stay calm, right? And try to bring everybody down. I call for seconds. I call for a supervisor. I sit there. I still talk to them. I don't just yank, I'm not going to open the door and start yanking them out of the car because they're not listening. I just pay attention where are their hands because I still have to be observant, right? Because I don't know what's in that car. Mm-hmm. I've had people run from me on traffic stops because they had a suspended license. That was the whole reason why they ran. Yeah. I've had people stop and not want to give me their ID because they've had warrants. And then that's what I find out later. I'm usually calm and collected. And I just tell them, like, look, whatever you have going on, we can deal with. But I still deal with it like calmly, and I just eventually get them out of the car. We get their ID, and then we go from there.
So looking at it, you're saying that this isn't like it's not a huge issue in your department. But looking at it from those two different perspectives, you have people who feel that they have been harmed by a system that is set up against them. And then you have your perspective where you're working in the field and just trying to do your job. Where do you think the middle ground is? Like what kind of, if Deputy J were to put on the hat of the person in charge to fix it, what kind of solutions are there to bridge the gap between the two perspectives?
I highly encourage anybody to go to their local agency and request a ride-along. Almost every department will allow ride-alongs. So then they don't allow citizens to get out of the car, but you can at least go on a traffic stop, sit in the front seat and watch how the things that we deal with. And just kind of see it firsthand. I highly recommend anyone to do that. There's honestly no way to combat it. I mean, there's not. I mean, again, I wish people would have common sense and that if you're stopped by a law enforcement officer, don't argue on the side of the road. if you feel like you were illegally stopped, comply with his demands, give him your stuff, and then call in later. Call in, make a complaint, a formal complaint, so it gets reviewed by uppers, and then let it play the process out that way. Don't sit there on the side of the road and then try to argue, well, because of the color of my skin, X, Y, and Z.
And I wanted this conversation to keep going, so I didn't want to interrupt before, but there's one thing that you said, Deputy, that I wanted to jump in and argue with you, and it's because it hit my ear wrong. So I'm kind of glad that you and Jamie were having this conversation, because it gave me a chance to kind of mull over what I was feeling, what I was trying to respond to. And when you were giving your examples earlier, and you were giving about, there's individuals that get shot and it's justified. That word justified kind of hit my ear wrong. And I wanted to fight. See, I'm already using words to be argumentative. I wanted to really argue with you and say, well, nobody's life's justified to take away. But then I had to take a moment to say, your job, your profession, you're putting yourself in harm's way at all times. And to me, that safety, there has to be a level of safety I'm assuming, tell me where I'm wrong, where you have to go and do these traffic stops, or you're dealing with individuals of the public. And if those situations aren't being met, I've not been trained as a police officer, but for me, I would say I need to keep other people around me safe, and I need to keep myself safe. And if you have someone that's not complying with your demands, regardless of how they feel, if they should have been pulled over or not, it feels like there's an escalation point to it. And so I just kind of wanted to circle back around, because I don't know, Jamie, if you or even our listeners had kind of a response to the word justified when we were talking about your example, but I did. And I'm trying to kind of rationalize that in my brain. And the way I'm rationalizing it is there's safety that you have to be concerned about in your profession that I never had to think about in my profession. And so I'm trying to overcome that word justified, and it just kind of hit my ear wrong.
Oh, I was not saying is that justified is what I'm saying is that the officer's actions were justified, regardless of what the social media warriors or the general public want to think or feel. Like, those officers' actions were justified in what they did. If somebody shoots at me, I'm going to shoot back. I have to stop the threat, right? This person has now escalated the situation to, they are willing to take my life. I have to stop that threat, because I don't know if they're going to continue down the road and take somebody else's life, right? That's what I mean by justified. What I'm saying is that they didn't officers aren't out there just shooting people to shoot people. Right? We all understand that.
So, and some of that, I do think that some of the criticism for various departments that this has come up. And, I think that there are so many situations out there. And I can't know the details for everyone. I do know that I hear an entire group of people crying out saying this needs addressed and we need to look at this. And so I think, I guess my question is it justified then to ask departments to really look through their training protocol, to look through their procedures and their policies, and look at those pieces that might need to be shifted in order to make sure that all people have protection in various interactions with law enforcement?
Yeah, we go through all sorts of different trainings as far as de-escalation. That gets hit heavy every year, multiple times throughout the year. We do de-escalation training, and obviously me, and all my fellow officers, the last thing we want to do is take somebody's life. I don't think anyone can really truly comprehend what that means. I have buddies of mine that have had to, and it wasn't even a person of color. It was a Caucasian white male. And the damages that it did to that person afterwards, mentally, it's not something that you just walk away from and you're like, oh, okay, I did my job. I'm good. So that is a last resort. And unfortunately, it's a part of this profession that it's almost become this because of since the protest, it's almost cool and okay to flip off cops, cuss at cops, and not obey a lawful order, a lawful command. And because, oh, well, you can't do anything to me because of the color of my skin. You're going to be racist if you do anything. So there's also the other side to this where law enforcement officers are getting hurt because they're almost like, well, if I do something, am I going to be civilly sued? I don't want to be sued. I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to lose my job. I don't want to go to prison. So we have to be really careful in which direction you push this, because you're also getting your law enforcement officers hurt, or they're just kind of taking a step back and being like, well, we just won't really do anything because I don't want to get sued.
Right. That makes sense too.
Yeah. And again, this is probably more of just a statement because I don't even know a question right now that I want to form. But I just wanted to leave, maybe we'll leave this topic with this last comment. But you know, I've been in the IT profession for years. I've talked about it. Jamie, you've talked about your profession and how you've been in there for years. And you know, I have friends that are, you know, in chefs, that are in accounting, you know, banking, whatever. There's a variety of people that I know from a variety of different industries. But for whatever reason, it seems like you hear, you know, the racial tension within this profession more than any other. And I don't know, you know, growing up, and maybe, you know, me being a kid, not being aware, maybe the region or the area that I came from, I didn't really see that racial tension. And it seems like I've changed geographically now. So I live in a more metropolitan area. We have access to social media. And so I just can't tell if I'm being more aware of things that are happening, or if there's been a shift in the recent years where now the police officer or this profession is just swimming in racial tension. And it seems like you don't really see that in a lot of other professions. Yes, people are evil, people are mean, people can be discriminatory. I mean, we also have good people in the world. So it's just funny that this is the one profession that, as again, I'll label myself as an outsider, I look in and you almost have racism and, you know, being a police officer, or at least that profession, it's almost synonymous now. You almost expect to deal with that when you go into that profession. And I don't know, like I said, if that's something I'm just becoming more aware of, or if the tides are shifting, or what it is. But I just thought that was fascinating.
Don't you think some of that's experiential, though? Like, for instance, where you and I grew up, there wasn't a large variety of cultures and races in our town, right? I mean, it was predominantly, it was a pretty Caucasian city. And so, you know, I wonder if some of that, I guess for me, I always have to step back and look at it and say, you know, just like you coming on today, Deputy J, to say, I'm curious what that experience is like for you, and what that, how these things have affected you and your work. And to remember that there's a whole nother side of it that I can't experience. I can't say that I have ever been in a car and been afraid to be pulled over, not knowing what that interaction would look like. When I get pulled over, it's fine. Like, I usually know why I was pulled over. Okay, I haven't been pulled over for a long time. Just put that disclaimer out there. It's been a long time, but
JB's a rebel. She's pulled over all the time.
No, nope. But when I knew exactly what I had done, and I knew why I was being pulled over, and I had no fear of what was going to happen after that stop. And I think that there is a large group of people that do fear that, and to remember that that's where they're coming from helps me kind of sort that out for myself anyway.
Yeah, I would say, obviously the agency I work for, the office I work for, we're butted up to a massive, like a big city, like a metropolitan area. So our demographic is very well mixed. And I just tell people, like, what would you tell your kids, right? If they're in a car driving and they get stopped by a law enforcement officer, what would you tell them to do? I would hope that it would be comply. Like, you stop, you put your hands on the steering wheel so they can see your hands, because everyone in this country now can carry a gun as long as they're not a felon. Put your hands on the steering wheel and just listen to what they say. And if they ask you, you know, license, registration, insurance, you hand them your license, registration, insurance. It's that simple. Unfortunately, the people that want to argue on the traffic stops, there's more going on. they're suspended, they're barred, they don't have a license at all, they have a warrant, there's drugs in the car. I mean, there's something more going on.
Yeah. Well, and I was pulled over maybe a year ago now, where I was exceeding the speed limit in a zone that I wasn't supposed to. And I had the opportunity to have my daughter with me because I was taking her to school. And, you know, I hear you, Jamie, but for me, there's that respectful fear, I guess. Like, I just want to make sure I am following the steps that they're being provided to me, you know, his demands of what do they need from me. Again, and I had that moment to kind of teach my daughter to say, just listen, calm down. They're here to help you. They're just also doing their job. Listen to what they need. And it was kind of a cool moment because she was asking me a bunch of questions, and, you know, I don't mind sharing. She was like, "Were you even speeding? I don't think you were speeding, Dad." And I was like, "You know what? Let's just talk to the officers, see what they need. Maybe I'll get a warning. Maybe I won't." And what was really cool is the police officer at the time who did that really humanized all of that for me and really was a great example. I don't think he knew he was, but he was a really great example to my daughter, because there was a conversation, there was a meeting of the minds, there was a level of respect from the officer and from us that I think we both really, liked and gravitated towards, because when it was all said and done, he did cut me a little bit of a break. Like, he could have really got me for a lot more than he did. And I think it was because of how we were treating each other. At least this is what I believe. It was how we were treating one another that was kind of the deciding point for that. I still had a speeding ticket. I still had to pay a fine, but it could have been a whole lot worse. And so I just thought that was a really cool moment.
You used like a very good word, which was humanized, because a lot of people forget that who we are. I mean, we're humans too. We're people. We've made mistakes. Some of your best law enforcement officers are ones that come from different backgrounds. Like, my background was, and we talked about this before. When I was a kid, I made mistakes. I got told by a judge when I was 21 years old, "I see you one more time, I'm barring your license." So I know what that was like. I know what it was like driving with a suspended license, but, you know, you had to get from point A to point B. When I was younger, 24, 25 years old, I got an OWI. I was young and stupid, made mistakes. So people forget that. When I come up, and my initial approach to you is the same with everybody. And then from there, I talk to people and I tell people, I've had people cry in my back seat as I've explained to them that I've been in their exact situation. And you can't let this define you. But just don't forget that just because I'm wearing a badge and I'm an officer doesn't mean that I was never in your shoes. Doesn't mean that I'm better than you, because I'm not. And again, when I said it before, is I came from dirt floor poor. I mean, legitimately, our front yard was dirt. I mean, I come from a very, different background than the average, person. Like, when I got into law enforcement, I thought you had to be, from a wealthy family, you had to be college level education, you had to have family or friends that were in the profession. And that's how it used to be years ago, but it's shifted so much because people don't want to do this profession.
Well, and I would like to just take a minute to recognize that, you as an individual are wearing a badge that represents something different for every person that you encounter. And, unfortunately, that is, that's the cloak that you're surrounded with, whether it's attributed to you or others. And, I appreciate hearing, your perspective in that, because I do think that, I'm sure we all, as teenagers, as we're tearing around town, can remember that one police officer that was just really tough on us, right? Like, we can all remember that one that we were like, oh, we don't want to get pulled over by that one, right? And that's, I think those are officers that exist, but that can really, and I guess, I guess I also want to talk a little bit about like educating our kids, because I do think that is, that's a key piece of how we do this. But just to add a little perspective, I'm sure you heard this in our earlier banter. I am a Grey's Anatomy fan, because Grey's Anatomy reflects life, I guess. I don't know. But there was an episode. Are
you getting paid by them now at this point?
I should be.
Them like all the time. Anyways,
can I have a cameo?
They're a sponsor.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's their final season too. So you better hurry, Jamie.
I'm seriously, like, I will be sponsored by them. Yes. But no, there was an episode far before 2020, which is when, when I think a lot of this really, really flash panned. There was an episode where one of the doctors, had a case of a kiddo, who had been killed trying to get into his own house, in an affluent neighborhood, a Black family. And, Dr. Bailey and her husband decided that they really needed to visit with their son, to make sure that he knew. And I remember listening to her and her husband talk to her kid about, when you encounter the police. And it was all of those things. It was, don't run, just comply, do what they tell you to do, make sure they can see your hands, all of those things. But it was different. The language was different. The feeling was different, and the urgency was different. And I think that comes from a place, that comes from a reason. And it may not even be, we're talking Dr. Bailey. And if you don't watch the show, Dr. Bailey is the bomb. She is the woman in charge over there. And she didn't have negative interactions with law enforcement herself. But some of that is histrionic and some of that is generational. And so, I think that was a big eye-opening thing for me to think about, as I was teaching my own kids when they were starting to drive and be more autonomous on their own in public too. But I do appreciate that idea of, making sure that we teach our kids about those things too. I think that's an important piece.
Yeah, it's, life experience is huge, right? And you can't teach that. It's just either you have it or you don't. I train people, so I'm a trainer, on the streets, and I see it from some that when they come, you can tell they don't have any life experience. They're young. They probably just did a couple years of college, really didn't get into anything. And then you can talk to other ones who were young, dumb, ran from the cops, like you said. I was a kid, skateboarded, got ran off by security. So you can tell the difference, and then you can watch how they interact with people, and you have to humble them and try to help explain to them that, you don't know what this individual is going through in life. You got to keep those things in mind. I'm not huge into writing citations. Again, I was there, right? I got told by a judge, if I see you again, I'll borrow your license. So I'm not real big into writing citations. I'm very, very lenient. I have to write warnings because there has to be a paper trail, right? It has to show that I'm not favoring one gender or race over another. So I have to write at least a warning. But I try to explain to people, and I try to be as human as possible, right? I am human, so I try to sympathize with them and understand. I've had people that were speeding and they start crying because they think they're going to get a speeding ticket. I come up with a warning and they're like, "Oh my God, thank you so much." And they explain to me that they're just going through a lot right now. Them and their significant other are separating, and so it's just you got to keep things like that in mind in this profession. At least I do. Again, like I said, I'm not better than anybody. I've been pulled over too. Even being in this profession, I've been in my personal vehicle and been pulled over, and you're like, "Oh my gosh, okay, what did I do?" So,
okay,
I've seen both sides of it.
Okay, so
I just have a quick follow up. Can I just?
No.
This totally brings me to. This has been a pretty heavy conversation, and I have a question that I was dying to ask and was joking with Malin about before, and you totally just opened the door.
Well, he just opened the door to my question, so go ahead. You go first.
Do you really have quotas? Do police departments have quotas,
no.
Deputy Jay?
No, we can't. We can't have quotas. They can't do that because. So here's the deal. Our agency, if they were to mandate that we write citations, then that takes away my discretion, and they can't do that.
Okay, louder for the people in the back. No, I'm just kidding. I'm going to make sure to share this clip with everyone I know that is like, oh, they're just meeting their quotas, because I'm like, there's no way there's quotas. But anyway, thank you for answering that.
Well, is there like now? A law enforcement officer can have his own made up quota in his own head, but no, like our agency, no, we don't have quotas.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Okay, so here's the question that I have, Deputy, which is who polices the police? So, we've talked about, like Jamie said, we've had a lot of heaviness. So this is kind of meant to be lighthearted, but another question that I've had is who are the individuals that get to or have to police the police, or is there a lot of we look the other way because they're one of us? Just kind of curious.
No, I mean, we definitely don't look the other way. I've firsthand witnessed high ranking officials be arrested for crimes, you know. As far as like minor traffic violations, you know, brake light, speeding ticket, running a red light, things like that, like we don't look the other way. If I stop your car and I walk up and I've had ones where they never even told me who they were, and it was after the fact. I wrote them a warning, and it was later that somebody said, "Hey, you stopped so and so, and he wanted to thank you for writing a warning." Well, I had no idea who he was. If they say who they are, so I'm heavy again on warnings. So one officer told me this. He's retired now, and he gave me a pretty good analogy. So the way that he thought about it was like this, and everybody hated this guy, right? All the citizens in the area hated this guy because he would write citations. But the way that he did it, it didn't matter who you were. If he wrote a citation for a brake light violation to one individual, he had to write a citation for that to every other car that he stopped, because he wanted to show that he's not profiling. If I write it to one, I write it to everybody that day. But then another officer told me, he goes, the reason why he doesn't write citations to a law enforcement officer for minor violations would be, if I'm on the side of the road and I'm fighting somebody and that officer drives by in his personal vehicle, there's a unwritten rule, right? We stop and we help one another. I'm going to get out of my car and I'm going to run up and I'm going to get involved. I'm not on duty, but I'm on duty. That's a law enforcement officer. That's somebody fighting for his life. A normal citizen's probably going to drive by and go, "Oh, that sucks. I'm going to call that in." So that's kind of where that is. That's why that's there.
Okay. Oh, well, thanks for kind of helping clear that up, because that's always been something I'm like, yeah, but who polices the police? Anyways. And here's the last one. I think this is a little bit lighthearted, but this was the last one on our list of questions for you, Deputy, which is, Jamie, you brought this up months ago. I think you called them First Amendment auditors. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm super curious. This has been something that has been brought up locally, and it has kind of been prominent locally, where there's a group of citizens calling themselves First Amendment auditors who kind of like listen to the scanner and follow like traffic stops and different law enforcement interactions, record it, and then play them back over the internet with all of the things that they did wrong. Most of which I don't think are things that they actually did wrong, but that's a personal opinion. Have you had any experience with First Amendment auditors in your area, and what has that looked like, or even and other, like some of your colleagues?
I don't know if they were direct First Amendment auditors. We deal with a lot of, like, I would say a lot. We've dealt with sovereign citizens, which are kind of similar. They kind of run under their like own, like, I'm not driving, I'm traveling. Like, that's their verbiage. I'm in my vehicle, which is private property. Well, your private property is on public roadway, so I can stop you. The thing that's interesting about them is that they recognize the sheriff's office as like the only form of law enforcement that they will essentially, I don't want to say they oblige by like our commands and stuff, but they recognize us more because of the sheriffs are elected and not put in place like a chief of police.
Oh, they're not hired. They're elected. Yeah.
Correct. Yep. They're not hired. They're elected. So they view the sheriff's offices differently than they do like a regular police officer.
Huh. That's interesting, because that was like that for a while in the case I was thinking of too. Huh.
Yeah. You got to be careful with them because they'll try to twist words and twist laws. And so, yeah.
So have you heard of any, within your own area, have you heard of anything like, cause to me, when I first saw these videos, I was like, oh my goodness, that is like a safety thing. Why would someone get out and, you know, I know there's rules like 10 feet away, or I don't know what the rules are, but there's rules, I guess, about how close they can get to the interaction. But it just seems like such a safety concern. Like, someone is going to get hurt if you're inserting yourself in something you don't belong inserting yourself in. But
Jamie, these First Amendment auditors, they're doing this and trying to support Like what, why, do you know why they're doing this? People running around just videotaping, is it for a purpose, or is it just for, they think that safety, you know, protecting the community? Like, why are they doing this and hoping to find criminal acts that the police are doing?
Yeah, it's kind of policing the police is kind of the guise that they are under. And I think First Amendment auditor is a very loose title for, because lots of people are using that. Some people will like go into a courthouse and it's a public space. It's a public space. So I should be able to record here, and then argue with county clerks and things like that for not letting them record there. I mean, it's a lot of bizarre stuff. But I think I think that some of them do that to, to expose wrongdoings of departments and things like that.
They're trying to, like you just said, they're trying to find the wrong in what law enforcement officers are doing, like on traffic stops. They can record all they want. I pretty much tell them. I've never had anyone come to my traffic stop, but if they did, I've had a dad come to a traffic stop, and he wasn't a First Amendment auditor, but he was a sovereign citizen, and he was trying to get involved in a traffic stop where I had his kids stopped, and I essentially just told him, like, you need to stay up on the sidewalk, stay away from the car. If you come, essentially, like, if you get up to the car, if you're going to touch the car, try to get in and talk to them. I don't know what is in your hand. I don't know what you might be trying to place in the car or get from the car. So I essentially tell them where, you know, essentially, like, if you get any farther than this, or if you do this, I'll just arrest you for interference, because you're interfering with my traffic stop.
Yeah. It's it's been a hot button issue in my local area. So I was just curious if that was happening in other places too.
Well, and I would just be curious on when does doing, you know, standing and observing become an obstruction of justice? At what point do they cross that line? Is it a certain radius they have to stay back, or are they allowed to record whatever they want? Like, to me, that's where my mind goes, is when does it stop being your right to record, and when does it become obstruction of justice?
So, I mean, you don't have the right to privacy in the public. So anyone can record you in a public setting. You don't have the right to deny somebody that. Like I said, they can record from the sidewalk all they want. I don't care. But it's when their actions are interfering with my investigation, that's when it becomes interference.
So are there black and white rules around that, or is it pretty loose for interpretation?
So there's no, I mean, essentially it's really up to the officer. I mean, if I tell you to stop putting your hands in your pocket, and you put your hands in your pocket again, then I can arrest you for interference, because you keep putting your hands in your pocket for a reason, right? It's no different than that. I mean, if I tell you, hey, you need to stay over there, you can film from there. If you essentially interfere with my talking, or if you're trying to overtalk me, they can't hear what I'm saying, I can't hear what they're saying, you're interfering with my investigation. You try to let them know as much as you can, right? It's not an immediate, like, I'm arresting you and then bam, I arrest them. You try to give them multiple chances to stop, and then finally get to the point where you're like, okay, like, enough's enough.
Oh, so you've warned them ahead of time. Well, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting conversation. Interesting topic to talk about. It's a big deal around here.
Yeah, Deputy Jay, I just want to thank you for coming on. I know we've talked about some really heavy aspects of your job, and you've been doing, you know, a really good job of being as candid and open with us as possible. And I do appreciate that. That allows us to ask some of these hard questions. And for me, it's like a kid in a candy store. I have an opportunity to ask some of those questions that float around in my brain and actually hear from somebody in that profession. So as we're concluding, I just want to say thank you for coming on and being open and transparent. And it was a great conversation, and I really appreciate it.
And thank you, also thank you for your service, and please stay safe. I know it's a difficult job, and I for one appreciate law enforcement and what they do for us. So thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And thanks for having me on again. I highly encourage anyone where they live to go request to do ride-alongs with their local agency and try to get somewhat of a firsthand knowledge. If anything, it's like watching live PD, but in the driver's seat, or in the passenger seat of the car. So that, and plus go out there, like I said, and watch the Fall of Minneapolis and some of these other things. Like just do your research and really see different angles of some of these, situations and really what the outcome was.
Yes, and I'm just going to mention this, so anybody that's listening, we will have a link to the Fall of Minneapolis documentary. You said that was on YouTube. We'll have a link to that in our show notes as well, so then people that are listening, if you want to go see what that's about, you can go ahead and follow that link. So we'll get those put in there for you. All right. Well, I think that's it for us today. Anybody else have anything else we want to wrap on before we close the conversation?
I don't. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us on Roundtable Mindset this week. Hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next time around the round table. Have a great week.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. This podcast was recorded and edited by Jamie and Malin. Music by Famous Cats. If you have a topic you'd like us to discuss, please email us at roundtablemindset@gmail.com. Text or call us at 402-819-8999 or join the conversation on Facebook at Roundtable Mindset Podcast.
And never miss a new episode by making sure you like, subscribe, and share wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for being our guest today. See you next time at the Roundtable. And remember, your opinions and perspectives matter and are appreciated, but might not always be shared by others, and that's okay.